In a small town, there was a family. They had a grandma, and when she passed away, they got some of her things. One of those things was an old doll. It was made of porcelain, all cracked and missing some bits. The doll had curly hair and a fancy dress that was old and faded. The family took it home, thinking it would be a nice memory of their grandma. At first, everything was fine. They put the doll on a shelf in the living room, and it just sat there. But after a while, strange things started to happen. At night, they could hear whispers coming from the living room, whispers that no one could understand, like a secret language. One night, the whispers were so loud that it woke everyone up. They went to the living room, and the doll was sitting there, but its eyes were moving. It was looking at them. They were scared, but they thought it might be a draft or something. So they put the doll in a box and locked it in the attic. But the whispers didn't stop. They got louder and more eerie. It was as if the doll was calling to them. They couldn't take it anymore, so they decided to get rid of the doll for good. They took it out of the attic and buried it deep in the backyard. The next morning, they woke up and the doll was back in the living room. It was sitting there on the shelf, just like before. But now, its face was even more cracked, and it had a sinister smile. They couldn't believe their eyes. It was as if the doll had come back from the dead. They were terrified, and they didn't know what to do. They couldn't get rid of the doll, no matter how hard they tried. It always found its way back to the living room. The whispers continued, and they became more menacing. One night, they couldn't take it anymore. They decided to burn the doll. They took it outside, lit a fire, and threw it in. As the flames engulfed the doll, they heard a bone-chilling scream like a banshee wailing. The fire burned bright and hot, but the doll wouldn't burn. It just sat there, untouched by the flames. They watched in horror as the doll emerged from the fire, its porcelain face now completely blackened. It floated towards them, its eyes glowing with an eerie light. They ran back into the house, but the doll followed them. It was relentless. They finally realized that the only way to stop the doll was to destroy it completely. They grabbed a sledgehammer and smashed the doll into 1,000,000 pieces. As they did, they heard a blood-curdling scream, and the whispers finally stopped. The family was exhausted and terrified, but they knew they had done what they had to do. They gathered up the broken pieces of the doll and buried them deep in the backyard, hoping that the curse was finally lifted. From that day on, the house was quiet, and the family could sleep peacefully at night. They never spoke of the haunted doll again, but they would always remember the terrifying ordeal they had endured. And they knew that some things should never be brought into their home, no matter how innocent they may seem. Once, a couple decided to visit an estate sale. They were ordinary people, living an ordinary life, and they had never given much thought to the idea that cursed objects could exist. On this fateful day, they stumbled upon a vintage mirror that caught their eye. It was ornate, with an elaborate golden frame, and it seemed to have an air of mystery about it. The couple decided to buy the mirror and brought it home with them. They placed it in their living room, thinking it would be a lovely addition to their home decor. Little did they know that this mirror held a sinister secret. At first, everything seemed fine. The mirror reflected their images just like any other mirror. However, as days turned into weeks, they began to notice something peculiar. Whenever they gazed into the mirror for an extended period, their reflections started to distort. It started with subtle changes. Their faces would warp slightly, making them look older or younger than they were. They brushed it off as a trick of the light or their imagination. But as time passed, the distortions became more pronounced. One evening, while standing in front of the mirror, they watched in horror as their reflections turned into grotesque, nightmarish figures, their own faces twisted into contorted masks of fear and despair. The figures seemed to whisper, their voices barely audible, but the words sent shivers down the couple's spines. "What do you desire?" the figures in the mirror whispered, their voices a chilling echo of their own. Terrified, the couple stepped away from the mirror. They tried to rationalize what they had seen, convincing themselves that it was merely a trick of their overactive imaginations. But the mirror's malevolent influence continued to grow. As the days passed, the couple's relationship began to deteriorate. They argued incessantly, their once loving bond strained to the breaking point. The mirror seemed to feed on their negative emotions, growing stronger with each fight. It became an obsession for them, an irresistible urge to gaze into its depths, despite the horrors that awaited them there. They reached out to friends and family for help, but their pleas were met with skepticism. No one else could see the mirror's true nature. It was as if the cursed object had singled them out, trapping them in its web of despair. Physically, they began to deteriorate as well. Dark circles formed under their eyes, and they lost weight rapidly. Their health declined, and doctors could find no medical explanation for their symptoms. The couple was trapped in a nightmarish cycle of torment, unable to escape the mirror's grip. One day, as they stood before the mirror, their reflections took on an even more sinister appearance. This time, the figures in the mirror beckoned them closer, their grotesque hands reaching out as if to pull them into the glass. The couple felt an irresistible urge to obey, to step through the mirror and join the nightmarish world within. But at the last moment, they snapped out of their trance. With sheer willpower, they turned away from the mirror and covered it with a heavy cloth. The room grew cold, and the mirror seemed to emit an otherworldly wail of frustration. The couple knew they had to get rid of the cursed object once and for all. With trembling hands, they carefully wrapped the mirror in thick blankets, making sure not to look at it directly. They carried it out of their house and into the backyard, where they had dug a deep hole. They lowered the mirror into the hole, their hearts pounding with fear. As they began to fill the hole with dirt, the mirror let out one final, unearthly scream. The ground shook beneath them, and the mirror's frame cracked, releasing a dark, malevolent energy. But they did not waver. They continued to bury the mirror until it was completely covered. Exhausted and drained, the couple stepped away from the grave they had dug. The air felt lighter, and the sense of dread that had haunted them for so long began to lift. They knew they had done the right thing, that they had broken free from the mirror's curse. In the days that followed, their health improved and their relationship began to heal. The nightmares that had plagued them for so long gradually faded away. The mirror was gone, buried deep beneath the earth, never to torment them again. But as they looked back on their ordeal, the couple knew that they had come dangerously close to losing everything. They had learned a valuable lesson about the dangers of cursed objects, and they vowed to be more cautious in the future. The mirror of despair was gone, but its memory would haunt them for the rest of their lives, a chilling reminder of the darkness that could lurk in the most unexpected places. John had always been an ordinary man. He lived in a small town, worked a 9-to-5 job, and had a few close friends. Life was simple, and he was content. That was until one fateful day when a mysterious package arrived at his doorstep. The package was a small wooden box with intricate carvings on its surface. It had no return address, and John couldn't remember ordering anything online. Intrigued and a little apprehensive, he opened it. Inside, nestled in black velvet, was a ring unlike any he had ever seen before. The ring was made of dark, tarnished metal, and its design was unsettling. It had a twisted serpentine shape with a small blood-red stone embedded in its center. It sent shivers down John's spine, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from it. He reached out and picked it up, feeling an odd warmth emanating from the ring. As soon as the ring slid onto his finger, John felt a surge of energy unlike anything he had ever experienced. It was as if a newfound power had coursed through his veins. He felt invincible, as if he could achieve anything he set his mind to. At first, John's life seemed to improve. He excelled at work, earning promotions and a substantial raise. His once modest home was transformed into a luxurious mansion, and he surrounded himself with lavish possessions. His friends marveled at his newfound success, but they couldn't help but notice a change in him. John had become obsessed with power and control. He no longer had time for his friends, dismissing them with a wave of his hand. He became ruthless in business, using his influence to crush his competitors. His once caring and compassionate nature had turned cold and calculating. But it wasn't just his personality that had changed. Strange things began happening around him. Objects in his home would move on their own, and eerie whispers echoed through the halls at night. The air felt heavy with an oppressive presence, as if something malevolent had taken root in his life. One evening, as John stared at himself in the mirror, he noticed something disturbing. His reflection seemed to warp and contort, his own face twisting into grotesque, nightmarish shapes. Terrified, he stumbled back, but the mirror returned to normal as if nothing had happened. Sleep eluded John as the nightmares began. He would wake up drenched in sweat, tormented by visions of shadowy figures and echoing screams. The ring on his finger seemed to tighten its grip on him with each passing day. Desperate for answers, John sought out the advice of a local historian. The historian told him about the ring's dark history, a history steeped in blood and suffering. It was rumored to have belonged to a malevolent sorcerer who used it to amass power and wealth. But in the end, the ring had consumed him, driving him to madness and death. John's heart sank as he realized the truth. He had unwittingly unleashed a curse upon himself, and the ring was slowly draining him of his humanity. Determined to break free from its grasp, he decided to get rid of it. He tried to remove the ring from his finger, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if it had become a part of him, fused to his very soul. Panic set in as he realized that he was trapped, a prisoner to the cursed ring's insidious influence. Weeks turned into months, and John's life spiraled further into darkness. He became a recluse, rarely leaving his mansion. The whispers grew louder, and the shadows in his home seemed to come alive. He could feel the malevolent presence of the ring growing stronger, its thirst for power insatiable. One night, as John sat alone in his dimly lit study, he heard a voice that seemed to emanate from the ring itself. It whispered promises of ultimate power, of eternal life, if only he would embrace its darkness. But John knew that there was no escaping the curse. He had to find a way to destroy the ring once and for all. With a heavy heart, he ventured out into the night, seeking the one place where he believed the ring's power could be broken, the river that ran through the heart of the town. It was said that the sorcerer who had created the ring had met his end there, and perhaps the river held the key to ending the curse. As John stood on the riverbank, he could feel the ring's resistance, as if it knew what he was planning. With all his strength, he pulled it from his finger and hurled it into the dark waters below. The moment it hit the surface, the river seemed to come alive, its waters turning black as night. A haunting wail echoed through the night, a sound that chilled John to his core. He watched in horror as the river surged, frothing and churning, as if a great battle was taking place beneath the surface. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the river calmed, its waters returning to their normal state. Exhausted and shaken, John realized that the curse had been lifted. The ring was gone, and with it, the malevolent presence that had haunted him for so long. He knew that he could never undo the damage that had been done, the lives he had harmed, but he was determined to make amends. John returned to his friends, humbled and remorseful. He sold his mansion and donated the proceeds to charity, vowing to live a life of simplicity and kindness. The nightmares and whispers faded, replaced by a sense of peace and redemption. But the memory of the accursed ring would never truly leave him. It served as a haunting reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the allure of power. John had learned the hard way that true strength came from within, and that some desires were better left unfulfilled. And so, the town of John's redemption continued on, a place where the tale of the accursed ring served as a cautionary reminder to all who heard it. A reminder that even the most ordinary of people could be consumed by darkness, and that the pursuit of power could lead to a fate far worse than death.